Have you ever felt like like the world around you is just like waiting to be discovered? You know, like there are stories hidden in every corner, just begging to be told.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, don't even get me started about last night's game.
Oh,
What happened? Well, we're exploring this totally normal, dusty old ruin, right? And then my character, she stumbles into this, like, hidden passage.
no way.
Yeah, and it led to this massive underground city, like completely cut off from the surface world. They had their own language, even crazy customs. It was amazing.
Right.
But it also made me think, like, how does a DM even create something that detailed? I mean, that's some serious immersion.
Well, that's a great question, and luckily for us, today's deep dive is all about world building, and more specifically, world building techniques for D&D campaigns. We'll be using the article How to Create Immersive D&D Campaign Settings with Detailed World Building from LitRPG Reads to guide our conversation.
And, you know, even if you're not into D&D specifically, the techniques we're going to talk about can be used for any creative project. You know, like if you're writing a novel, working on a video game, or just like world building for fun, it's surprisingly universal.
Right. So where do we even begin with something like that?
Yeah.
Well, the article emphasizes the importance of starting with a strong core concept or theme, right? Sort of like the foundation of a house. It sets the tone and informs the rest of the world you create.
Yeah, it's like that initial spark, the seed of an idea that grows into this intricate, fascinating world.
Right?
You know, like maybe it's a world rebuilding itself after some kind of magical apocalypse, and the survivors are clinging to remnants of the past, or maybe a world where celestial beings are manipulating mortals for their own amusement, you know, playing these cosmic games. There are so many possibilities.
Yeah, for sure.
And the key is to find that theme that you're passionate about and that your players will love too.
The article mentions that tailoring the world to your players' interests is also really important.
Oh, definitely.
So like if your group thrives on, you know, political intrigue, you could design a world with all these different factions vying for power, each one with their own, you know, secrets and agendas. It'd be like a world where alliances are constantly changing, like shifting sand, and like every conversation is some kind of veiled threat, right?
Exactly. And on the flip side, you know, if your players are all about exploration, if they want to discover new things, then you can create these vast wildernesses filled with, I don't know, hidden wonders, dangerous creatures, lost civilizations, uncharted territories.
I like that.
Even a place where the laws of physics are different, you know, where they can have these mind-bending experiences.
So once you have your core concept, that seed, you got to start mapping your world. Now you might be thinking maps are just visual aids, but there's so much more than that.
Oh, for sure.
The article argues they're like characters in their own right, shaping how things happen, inspiring exploration, and even like driving conflict. And when you're working on that map, think about the features that make it unique. Like don't just have generic, you know, mountains and forests. Create landscapes that feel both believable and fantastical at the same time. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, I get you.
Like a giant forest where the trees whisper secrets to anyone who'll listen.
Or a city built on the back of a colossal, slumbering sea creature.
Exactly. The goal is to make these locations more than just points on a map. They should be places that draw players in, pique their curiosity, you know, places that have a history, a purpose, their own stories to tell.
Right, like mountain ranges with peaks so high they like pierce the heavens.
Yeah.
Or a desert where like the sands shift constantly and reveal these lost ruins or forgotten treasures.
Oh, I like that. And don't be afraid to work in those magical elements, even with the geography.
Of course.
So a river could flow with enchanted water that gives people visions, or a cave system could be lit by, you know, bioluminescent fungi with an eerie glow. Okay, but a world is more than just its physical landscape, right?
Yeah.
It's the people, the cultures that make it come alive. So once you've got the lay of the land, you need to populate it with all these diverse and compelling cultures.
That's right. So think about the different societies that might exist in your world. What are they all about? What are their customs and traditions and beliefs?
Like what languages do they speak? What kind of art do they create? Each culture should feel distinct.
Definitely. Consider their environment. How has that shaped their values and traditions? Maybe you have this nomadic tribe. They wander across vast plains, their lives ruled by the stars and the spirits of the land, or
maybe a society that lives in this incredible city built into the side of a massive canyon. Their whole life would be this dance between tradition and innovation.
Right, and as you develop these cultures, you know, think about how they interact with each other. Are they allies, rivals? the relationships between them can create so many stories.
Oh, for sure. Those clashes, collaborations, all of it, they can lead to misunderstandings, alliances, betrayals, it's all dynamic. And it makes the world feel alive.
Right, and don't forget the smaller details. That's what really makes them feel real.
Oh, you mean?
Like, what do people eat? What do they wear? What kind of music do they like? These little details have a huge impact on how immersive the world feels.
You're right. And what about language, right? Does a culture have a specific dialect? Or are there special phrases and gestures that mean certain things? Like, even just how people greet each other can say a lot about their culture.
Yeah, like in a society that really values strength and combat, their greeting might involve showing off their skills. Or in a culture that, values knowledge, maybe they exchange ideas or stories as a greeting.
Yeah, it's these little touches that make your world feel like a real place, like a place where people actually live and love and experience all these different things.
Exactly, and within those cultures, you're going to have factions.
Right.
Organized groups with their own agendas, beliefs, and their own ways of getting things done. Factions are like another layer of complexity. They create conflict, they drive those alliances we talked about, and they give the players a way to really get involved in how the world works.
That makes sense.
Like, imagine a super secretive mage guild. They're manipulating events from the shadows. Their motives are a mystery to everyone, something like the Order of the Ibn Veil. Or maybe there's this huge merchant consortium like the Golden Compass Trading Company, and they control all the trade routes. They have all the economic power, and they're willing to deal with anybody, good or bad, as long as it makes them money.
And then you could have, like, a zealous group, super dedicated to eradicating anything they think is heresy. They might be brutal, but they truly believe in what they're doing, so they're a force to be reckoned with.
Exactly. The point is to make sure they feel real, that their actions matter in the world. And think about how they interact with each other. Do they go head-to-head, or is it all behind the scenes, sabotage and manipulation? And most importantly, think about how the players can get involved. Will they join a faction? Fight against one? Maybe they'll try to play them against each other. That interplay between players and factions makes the world feel responsive, like it reacts to their choices.
I see what you mean. So we have the geography, we have the cultures, we have the factions. But a world is more than just what's happening right now, right? It has a past, a history, and it shapes the present and influences the future.
You got it. Creating that history, it makes your world feel lived in, believable. It adds this depth that you don't get otherwise. And it can give you so many ideas for your campaign.
Absolutely.
Think about the events that shaped the world. Maybe there was a massive event, something that changed everything, like the Shattering, that split the continents apart and unleashed chaotic magic, or...
Right, or like a huge war, the War of the Ancients, that left scars all over the world, not just on the land, but on the people too.
Those are great, but they don't all have to be huge world-altering things. Sometimes it's the smaller events that really make an impact. Maybe there was a plague that destroyed entire villages, or some act of betrayal that shattered a powerful empire. It's about creating a history that feels real, that has consequences, and that continues to impact the world today.
Right.
And who knows, your players might stumble across remnants of that history.
Like they discover some ancient temple to a forgotten god, or uncover a vault full of artifacts from a lost civilization.
Exactly. And those discoveries can lead to new adventures, reveal secrets, or even change how the main story unfolds.
Very cool. And don't forget about all the myths and legends.
Oh, the myths and legends, yes. They add such a sense of mystery and wonder to the world. They tell us about the culture's beliefs and values, and they can be great inspiration for adventures.
Like what?
Well, imagine a story of a hero who sacrifices themselves to seal away this ancient evil.
Or a legend about a lost city filled with treasure, but guarded by terrifying monsters.
And those stories can be woven into the world itself. Maybe one of your characters has a backstory that ties into a local legend. Or one of their quests involves finding an artifact mentioned in an ancient myth.
Right, it's like this back and forth between the past, the present, history, and myth that really brings the world to life. It gives it a sense of continuity and makes the players feel like they're part of something much bigger than themselves.
And speaking of making things feel real, let's talk about magic and technology.
Okay.
These two forces can be intertwined in so many fascinating ways, changing how people live and interact with the world. Think about how magic could influence how technology develops.
So like airships powered by enchanted crystals, or cities lit by magical fungi.
Exactly. And the other way around, how can technology be used to control or enhance magic?
Like devices that make spells more powerful, or potions that give normal people magical abilities.
Right. The key is to find a balance that feels good for your world. Do you want magic to be commonplace or rare and mysterious? You know, something that people both revere and fear. The choices you make about how magic and tech work will have a huge impact on how the world feels. But even after all of that, geography, cultures, factions, history, magic, the most important part is how it all comes together to make the game fun and exciting for your players.
Yeah.
I mean, what good is a world if there are no good stories to tell in it, right? And that's where this idea of a campaign framework comes in. It's about taking everything we've talked about and weaving it into a narrative that pulls your players in and makes them feel like they're really part of the world you've created.
Okay, that sounds great.
And that is exactly what we'll be exploring in the next part of our deep dive. So we've laid some serious groundwork here. We've got continents, we've got cultures, and we might even have some hints about lost magic or ancient tech, right? But how do we make all of this more than just like a cool backdrop? How do we get players invested in the world?
Well, the article spends a lot of time talking about this idea of a campaign framework. It's not just about knowing what's in the world, it's about what's happening, what the players can actually get involved in, you know?
It's like you wouldn't just describe a city, right? You talk about the gang war that's about to erupt, the whispers of a hidden cult, or the big festival where anything could happen. Those are the things that make people want to be there, you know?
Right. And the cool thing is, the article talks about making those hooks relevant to the characters. Like, tie them into their backstories, their goals, maybe even some secret they're hiding.
Exactly. Imagine you have a character who's searching for their long-lost sibling, right? And it turns out that sibling is smack dab in the middle of that gang war we mentioned. Suddenly it's personal, it's not just background noise anymore.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Or maybe one of your characters is secretly descended from royalty and that big festival. It's actually connected to some ancient prophecy about their bloodline. They might not even know it yet, but just being there could change everything.
Wow. So these personal storylines, they're like threads woven into the bigger story, right?
Yeah.
It gives the players agency, makes their choices really matter.
Right. But it's not all about individual character arcs. We still need the feeling that the world is in motion, that things are happening that are bigger than just one character, you know?
So like dynamic world events.
Yeah.
Stuff that shakes things up and forces the players to adapt.
Exactly, like political upheavals, natural disasters, maybe even an invasion from another dimension.
Okay, I'm picturing this campaign where the players are trying to like negotiate peace between these two warring factions. But then out of nowhere, this volcano erupts.
Yeah.
And now they have to choose. Do they stick to the mission or do they try to help the people affected by the disaster?
See, those are the tough choices that make the game interesting. And it's not just random, right? That volcano. It could be tied to some old prophecy, or maybe even awakened by a rival faction that wants to disrupt the peace talks.
Oh, that's good. It's all about cause and effect, right? Making the world feel like this big complex system.
Right. But with all that stuff going on, character arcs, world events, all those factions scheming, how do we as, dungeon masters keep it all straight?
Yeah, that's a lot to juggle.
Organization is key. The article talks about creating a timeline of major events, both historical and the ones you're planning for the campaign. It's like a roadmap. Helps you keep track of everything and make sure it all feels connected.
That makes sense. It's like having the behind-the-scenes blueprint of the world. You can drop hints, foreshadow things, and you can adjust if the players go off script, which they always do, right?
Exactly. And remember, this is a journey, not a destination. You don't have to have every single detail figured out before you start playing. Sometimes the best ideas come from those unexpected moments during the game.
It's like the world itself is a player at the table, coming up with new stuff and surprising us all. But before we get too caught up in all that big picture stuff, there are some smaller things that can really make your world feel special,
Details, details, details. That's what brings it all to life. It's the difference between a boring, generic world and one that feels unique and memorable.
Okay, like what kind of details?
Well, think about those little things that create atmosphere. The way the light filters through the trees in a magical forest.
Or the smell of spices in a busy market.
The sound of wind in the ruins of a temple. Those sensory details are what really immerse your players in the world you're creating.
I like that. And those little quirks that make the world feel lived in, right? Like maybe there's a town where everybody speaks in rhymes.
Or a culture where people greet each other by touching foreheads. Those little things make it feel like a place where real people live.
And speaking of quirks, what about the creatures? It's easy to just use the monsters from the monster manual, but what if we tweak them? Or reskin them? Or even create brand new ones?
Oh, I love that. Like imagine a world where goblins ride giant spiders into battle.
Or a forest where the trees themselves are alive and try to grab anyone who gets too close?
Exactly. By changing up those classic monsters or creating new ones, your world feels totally different. But even those fantastical creatures need to make sense in the world, right?
What do you mean?
Well, think about their habitat, their behavior, their role in the food chain. How do they interact with other creatures? How do they affect the environment? If you consider those things, the world feels more real, you know?
Right.
And don't be afraid to break the mold. What if you had intelligent orcs who were pacifists and amazing craftspeople?
Or a race of shape-shifting fae who love to trick people.
Exactly. Think outside the box. Create creatures that surprise your players.
Yeah.
So we've talked about how to build a world that's rich in detail and full of potential adventures. But ultimately, the most important part is
The players.
the players. It's their engagement, their imaginations, their willingness to embrace the world you've created that makes it truly come alive. So how do we make sure they're captivated? That's what we'll be exploring in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, so we've talked about maps and cultures and monsters and even mischievous fae. But it all comes back to the players, right? How do we get them really invested in this world we've created?
It's about giving them a place where they can let their imaginations run wild, where their choices really matter, where they feel like they're a part of something big.
The article talks about these player-driven narratives, where the characters aren't just following a script, but are actually changing things as they go.
It's like instead of giving them a quest, you give them a problem, a mystery to solve, a conflict, and you let them decide how to deal with it.
So like maybe there's a strange illness going around, and the players have to figure out what's causing it, find a cure, and maybe even uncover a conspiracy while they're at it.
Or maybe there's like a power struggle in a nearby kingdom and the players get caught up in it. Their actions could determine who ends up on the throne.
Yeah, it's all about giving them the power to make choices, to feel like those choices have real consequences.
And, don't be afraid to let the players surprise you. Sometimes the best moments come when they do something you never expected. Embrace those moments, go with the flow, and let the story unfold naturally.
Yeah.
That's what makes tabletop role-playing so much fun. Remember, world building is a team effort. You're not building this world for your players, you're building it with them. Encourage them to share their ideas, their characters' backstories, what they want to see happen. Maybe one of your players has a character who's a historian. They can help you develop the history of a particular region, right?
Or maybe a player has a character who's an artist or a craftsperson. They can give you ideas for the kinds of art and technology that exist in your world.
Exactly. That kind of shared ownership really makes the world feel alive. And you know what? Don't forget to have fun. World building should be a blast, a chance to let your imagination run wild and make something truly special.
I totally agree.
When you're excited about your world, your players will be excited too. So there you have it, folks. A crash course in world building brought to you by the amazing insights of LitRPG Reads and author Paul Bello.
It's been a great conversation, and I hope everyone listening is feeling inspired.
But now, we want to hear from you. What's the one thing you would add to your world to make it truly unforgettable? A creature, a hidden society, a magical phenomenon.
Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation going.